She just wanted to grab some groceries, but two strangers decided she didn't belong. What started over a parking space turned into a moment of justice the whole parking lot would never forget. Aisha Jackson checked the time on her dashboard, 6:37 p.m. It had been another long, draining day at Brightwell Company, the marketing firm where she worked. The campaign deadline had kept her glued to her screen for hours, and her body ached from the tension. All she wanted now was to grab a few groceries and get home before it got too late. As she pulled into the Ridgewood Market parking lot, the lot was about half full. The bright glow of the store's sign flickered slightly, and a few shopping carts were scattered across the asphalt, abandoned by customers in a hurry. Aisha exhaled, rolling her shoulders before spotting an open space just a few steps from the entrance. Perfect. She pulled in, shut off the engine, and grabbed her purse from the passenger seat. Her mind was already on the list: milk, vegetables, a bottle of wine for the weekend. She had just opened her door when she noticed movement to her left. A dark blue SUV had stopped a few feet behind her, its headlights beaming. Couple sat inside. The man in the driver's seat gripped the wheel tightly, his knuckles white. The woman beside him was already opening her door, her expression sharp with irritation. Aisha barely had time to react before the woman stormed out. "Oh, you've got to be kidding me," the woman snapped, slamming the car door shut. She was in her mid-50s, shoulder-length blonde hair bouncing as she stalked toward Aisha. "We were waiting for that spot." Aisha blinked, caught off guard. Waiting? She hadn't seen them. Had they really been waiting for the same space? "I didn't see you," Aisha said, keeping her voice calm. "I'm happy to move if you were here first." But that wasn't enough. The man, tall, broad, and stiff with agitation, stepped out too, his gaze locked onto Aisha like she'd committed some personal offense. "Of course you didn't," he muttered under his breath, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Aisha paused, suddenly more aware of the tension crackling in the air. The woman, now standing a few feet away, scoffed loudly. "You people always think you can do whatever you want." The words hit like a slap. Aisha's stomach clenched, her grip tightening on the car door. "You people." Her first instinct was to ignore it, brush it off as frustration, but something about the way the woman said it made her skin crawl. She wasn't just mad about a parking space. There was something else under it, something uglier. "Look, I didn't see you," Aisha repeated, keeping her voice even. "Like I said, I can move." The woman huffed, placing her hands on her hips. "That's not the point." The man took a slow step closer, his presence looming. "You're not sorry. You just don't care," he said. "People like you never do." Aisha's heartbeat quickened. "People like you." There it was again. Her mind raced, debating whether to engage or just get back in the car and leave. But why should she? It was just a parking spot. She hadn't done anything wrong. But the way they were looking at her, the man's clenched jaw, the woman's narrowed eyes, it wasn't just about parking. It was about her. But she had no idea just how far they were willing to take it. Aisha could feel the weight of their stares pressing against her, but she refused to let them intimidate her. She had done nothing wrong. "Look," she said, inhaling deeply, "I don't want any trouble. If this space means that much to you, I'll move my car." She reached for her door handle, but Susan, now fully heated, threw up a hand, stopping her in her tracks. "Oh no. No, no, no. You're not getting off that easy," she spat. "You think you can just take whatever you want and then pretend to be the bigger person." Aisha frowned. "Excuse me?" You heard me, Susan said, stepping even closer, her voice rising. You people always play the victim. Aisha's jaw tightened. There it was again. The coded language. The venom in Susan's voice. She had dealt with people like this before. Passive-aggressive remarks at work. Microaggressions disguised as jokes. Condescending tones that implied she wasn't supposed to be where she was. But this was different. This was raw, unfiltered hostility. I'm not playing anything, Aisha said slowly, forcing herself to remain composed. I parked in an open space, that's all. Daniel, who had been silently fuming up until this point, suddenly lunged forward and shoved Aisha's shopping cart aside. The metal screeched against the pavement, the force of it sending the cart rolling into a nearby curb. You don't belong here, he muttered, barely loud enough for her to hear. Aisha's heart pounded in her chest. Did he just say that? The air between them felt charged, thick with unspoken intent. Susan smirked, arms crossed, watching her husband with satisfaction. Aisha could feel the heat creeping up her neck. She was outnumbered. The parking lot wasn't empty, but it wasn't packed either. People were walking past, some glancing their way, but no one was stopping. Maybe they thought it was just a typical argument. Maybe they didn't want to get involved. Aisha swallowed hard, forcing herself to stand her ground. You need to back up, she said, her voice firm now. Daniel let out a dry chuckle, tilting his head as if amused by her defiance. Or what? He challenged. Aisha clenched her fists. She wasn't afraid to stand up for herself, but she also wasn't reckless. She knew men like Daniel, the kind who thought they could throw their weight around without consequences. Susan, clearly emboldened by her husband's aggression, sneered. You're lucky we don't make you move. Aisha stiffened. Make me. Something shifted in the air. Aisha wasn't the only one who noticed it this time. A few bystanders had stopped, their eyes darting between the three of them. Aisha exhaled slowly. She needed to get out of this situation before it escalated further. But she had no idea that Daniel wasn't done yet. Aisha could feel the tension thickening, pressing down on her like an unseen force. The Millers weren't just angry, they were looking for a fight. Daniel squared his shoulders, stepping even closer. You think you can just walk away? He taunted, his voice low but sharp. You're not going anywhere. Aisha's pulse quickened. She instinctively glanced around, searching for someone, anyone who might intervene. A few people lingered nearby, their eyes darting toward the confrontation, but no one made a move. She had seen this before. People didn't want to get involved. They'd rather pretend they hadn't seen anything at all. Susan let out a bitter laugh. Look at her, she scoffed, acting all high and mighty, like we don't know exactly what kind of person she is. Aisha set her jaw. I'm not interested in whatever this is, she said, keeping her voice level. I've already said I'll move if you... Daniel grabbed her arm. It happened so fast that Aisha barely had time to react. His grip was tight, his fingers digging into her skin like he had every right to put his hands on her. A sharp gasp escaped her lips as she jerked back, yanking her arm free. Don't touch me. Her voice was louder now, firm enough to carry across the parking lot. A few heads turned. The air around them seemed to crackle with silent anticipation, but Daniel didn't look the least bit concerned. If anything, he looked proud of himself. Susan, emboldened by his aggression, shook her head in mock disappointment. Oh, so now you're the victim, she sneered. This is exactly what I was talking about. Always playing the poor helpless. She said don't touch her. The voice didn't belong to Aisha. Aisha turned her head, and for the first time, someone had stepped in. It was a young store employee, probably in his early 20s, wearing a Ridgewood Market apron. His name tag read Miguel. He stood a few feet away, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. Susan rolled her eyes dramatically. "Oh great, another one. What, you're gonna come to her rescue now?" Miguel didn't flinch. "I saw what just happened, and so did the cameras." Aisha's breath hitched. Cameras. She had forgotten about them. Susan's smirk faltered, but Daniel wasn't ready to back down. His jaw clenched, his nostrils flaring as he glared at Miguel. "Mind your business, kid." Miguel took a step forward. "Nah, this is my business. And if you put your hands on her again, I'm calling the cops." A flicker of uncertainty crossed Daniel's face. For the first time since this started, the Millers weren't in control anymore. But Aisha had no idea that someone else was already watching. Aisha's pulse was still racing, her arm tingling from Daniel's grip, but now something had shifted. She wasn't alone. Miguel's presence had disrupted whatever power the Millers thought they had over the situation. Susan huffed, folding her arms. "This is ridiculous. All this over a stupid parking spot." Miguel didn't waver. "You should leave." Daniel let out a slow breath through his nose, his fists tightening at his sides. He glanced around the parking lot. More people had stopped to watch now. Shoppers standing near their cars. A mother holding on to her child's hand a little tighter. An older man frowning from a few rows away. Aisha noticed something else too. A security camera mounted on a pole above the lot. Had it caught everything? But before she could dwell on that, another voice entered the mix. "Is there a problem here?" Aisha turned to see a tall, broad-shouldered man in jeans and a gray t-shirt walking toward them. His posture was relaxed, but his eyes were sharp, assessing the situation. As he approached, he held up a badge. Off-duty police officer. Daniel's entire demeanor changed in an instant. His shoulders stiffened, his expression flickering from aggression to something else. Hesitation. Susan forced a laugh, her tone suddenly lighter. "Oh, officer, no, there's no problem at all. Just a little misunderstanding." Aisha could have screamed at the way she switched up, playing innocent now that authority had stepped in. The officer glanced at Aisha. "Ma'am, are you okay?" Aisha swallowed, nodding slowly. "I just came here to get groceries." Miguel jumped in. He put his hands on her. "I saw it." The officer's expression darkened as he turned back to Daniel. "Is that true?" Daniel's jaw twitched. "It's not like that." "It's exactly like that," Miguel shot back. Susan scoffed, waving a dismissive hand. "Oh, please. She's just trying to make this something it's not." The officer ignored her. "Sir, I'm going to need you to stay right here while I make a call." Daniel's face went pale. Aisha could almost see the realization dawning on him. This wasn't going to be something he could just brush off. Susan grabbed his arm. "We don't have to stand here and take this. Let's just go." The officer lifted a brow. "Leaving the scene after putting your hands on someone? Not a smart move." Daniel didn't respond. His hands twitched at his sides, but he didn't move. The tension was suffocating. No one spoke. No one moved. And then, from somewhere in the distance, the faint sound of sirens broke through the silence. Daniel swallowed hard. It was too late. The wail of sirens grew louder, cutting through the thick silence of the parking lot. Daniel shifted his weight from one foot to the other, his jaw clenched so tight it looked like it might crack. Susan, on the other hand, went stiff, her eyes darting between her husband and the approaching officer. "You actually called them?" she hissed under her breath, her voice barely above a whisper. The officer didn't acknowledge her. He kept his eyes on Daniel. "Go ahead and stay right here," he said, his tone calm but firm. "I'd hate for this to turn into something worse than it already is." Aisha exhaled slowly, the tension in her chest easing just a little. For the first time since this all started, she felt like she could breathe again. But she wasn't foolish. She knew how quickly things could shift. Daniel must have known it too, because instead of arguing, he let out a slow breath as if trying to compose himself. "This is ridiculous," he muttered. "All this over a damn parking spot."
Miguel scoffed.
"Yeah, sure. That's all it was." Daniel shot him a glare, but Miguel didn't flinch. The younger man stood his ground, arms crossed, eyes steady. A police cruiser pulled into the lot, its blue and red lights flashing against the dimming sky. Two officers stepped out, one male, one female. Their eyes swept over the scene, quickly assessing everything. In a matter of seconds, the off-duty officer gestured toward Daniel and Susan. "I witnessed part of the altercation. The store employee here saw the rest. There are also security cameras." The female officer turned to Aisha. "Ma'am, would you like to press charges?" The question landed like a weight in her chest. She hadn't even thought about that. She had been so focused on making it out of the situation and scathed that the idea of pressing charges hadn't crossed her mind. Daniel scoffed. "Oh, come on. I barely touched her." Miguel's expression darkened. "You grabbed her." The male officer frowned. "That's assault." Susan let out a humorless laugh. "You've got to be joking." "Do I look like I'm joking?" the officer shot back. Aisha took a deep breath. She could feel the eyes on her, waiting for her answer. She looked at Daniel, who was avoiding her gaze now. Susan, still fuming but suddenly much less bold. Then she glanced at Miguel, the stranger who had stepped in without hesitation, and at the off-duty officer, who had ensured she wouldn't be dealing with this alone. Aisha straightened her spine. "Yes." Susan's mouth dropped open. "You can't be serious." The female officer nodded. "All right, sir. Turn around." Daniel barely had time to react before he was being guided toward the police car. He tensed as if he was about to resist, but the male officer gave him a look that made him think twice. Susan suddenly panicked, grabbed at the officer's arm. "Wait. No, this isn't—" "Ma'am, step back," the officer warned. "Unless you want to go with him." Susan froze, her face going red. She looked at Daniel, then back at Aisha. "You're going to regret this," she spat. Aisha didn't respond. She just watched as Daniel was cuffed and placed in the back of the cruiser. Miguel let out a low whistle. "Karma, man." Aisha exhaled, finally letting go of the breath she'd been holding. But she knew this moment would stick with her far longer than the parking lot ever would. The flashing red and blue lights painted streaks across the pavement, casting long shadows in the parking lot. Aisha stood still, watching as Daniel sat stiffly in the back of the cruiser, his face set in a deep scowl. Susan lingered a few feet away, her arms crossed tightly over her chest, lips pressed into a thin line. Aisha could still hear Susan's last words echoing in her mind. "You're going to regret this." Regret? She wasn't the one who had lost control. She wasn't the one who had put her hands on a stranger over a parking spot. She turned toward Miguel, who was still standing nearby, arms folded, watching the scene unfold. "Thank you," Aisha said, her voice steady now. Miguel shrugged. "It was the right thing to do." The female officer approached Aisha again, pulling out a small notepad. "We have enough to proceed with charges, but we'll need a statement from you. You'll likely be contacted for further details if this goes to court." Aisha nodded. "I understand." The officer jotted something down. "If you change your mind about pressing charges, let us know. But given the security footage and witness testimony, it's pretty cut and dry." Aisha let that sink in for years. She had dealt with moments like these in silence. Passing encounters, dismissive attitudes, the sharp sting of coded words meant to remind her that she was unwelcome in spaces where she had every right to be. But this time she hadn't been alone. She glanced at Miguel again, then at the off-duty officer who had kept his distance but had made sure the situation didn't spiral further. The presence of witnesses, accountability, and evidence had changed everything. Susan, still standing near the squad car, suddenly let out a loud sigh. "This is ridiculous. We're good people. We don't deserve this." Aisha tilted her head slightly. "Good people? Good people don't put their hands on strangers. Good people don't hurl insults when things don't go their way. Good people don't have to remind the world that they're good." But she didn't say any of that. She just gave Susan one last look before turning toward the store entrance. Miguel walked beside her. "You sure you still feel like shopping after all that?" he asked, a half-smile playing at his lips. Aisha let out a short laugh. "Honestly, I came here for a bottle of wine. I think I've earned it." Miguel chuckled. "Fair enough." As she walked into the store, the automatic doors sliding open in front of her, Aisha let herself breathe. This moment, this experience wouldn't define her, but it had reminded her of something important. Some people never expect to face consequences, but sooner or later they always do. And that was enough. Not all battles are loud. Some unfold in silence, until someone finally says, "Enough." Aisha stood her ground, and this time, she wasn't alone. If this story made you feel something, hit subscribe and let's talk in the comments below.